This is the Konstantinov SA-1. The inverted bullpup weapon is probably the most peculiar weapon you will ever see, since it had to be taken from above while the mechanisms and the barrel of the weapon were underneath your hands. It was designed by Alexander Konstantinov, the most bitter rival of Mikhail Kalashnikov. And he was probably the most eccentric weapons designer in the Soviet Union, or perhaps the world, creating the most peculiar weapons. In this video, we will talk about the curious world of Soviet bullpup weapons and the strange chimera you see on screen. So get comfortable, I'm Kevin Aguilar, and this is Guns Club. As I said, the creator of this weapon was Alexander Konstantinov. He had a long history of curious weapons and also a long, endless list of failures. It is known that he was born on February 3, 1913, and that he was the chief designer of Copper Up Arms Enterprises. I tried to find more information about this historic gunsmith, but I couldn't even find a photo of him. In contrast, I found a lot of information about the weapons he made, although you can read his name everywhere whenever Soviet weapons are discussed. There is so little information about him that it really makes me doubt his existence. He was a truly mysterious man, unlike other gunsmiths who were highly distinguished people from the Red Army, and their photos are abundant on the internet and in museums. It almost seems like he was some kind of frontman or something. I don't know, it's extremely curious. When the competition was held to adopt what would be the first Soviet designated marksman rifle in the 50s, Alexander presented the DOSB W10 and competed against his rival Mikhail Kalashnikov, who in turn would present the Kalashnikov automatic loading sniper rifle. The DOS biological weapon 10 was rejected because, and I quote, it was too crude a weapon, perhaps referring to the fact that the weapon was not entirely refined. It was cheaper and simpler, just like a Kalashnikov, but it was less accurate than its counterparts. The Kalashnikov rifle fared much worse. It was nothing more than an oversized AK-47. It wasn't even admitted to compete against the other rifles in the tests. Both weapons would end up being defeated by Evgeny Dragunov's Dragunov, which would become one of the rifles. Not to mention the best designated marksman and sniper rifle in history. The search for a replacement for the AKM series would begin in the early 60s. In this way, a lot of designers would present their designs. Particularly, our protagonist presented the Konstantinov SA-006, which turned out to be the main rival of the Kalashnikov A3, which in the future would be the AK-47-74. Konstantinov lost because his rifle simply turned out to be slightly inferior in accuracy and reliability to the A3. So this would be the first time he would lose the contract of his life against his rival Kalashnikov. However, the SA-06 was not a total waste, serving as a starting point for the AEG-971. Later on, in the 70s, a competition would be initiated for a carbine based on the AKS-74 to arm the tank crews, and in this competition, he would once again compete against his rival Mikhail Kalashnikov in the aircraft design. He presented the AEG-958, which was relatively very good but would end up losing against Kalashnikov in his PP-1. This was because Kalashnikov's rifle was easier to produce, being essentially a very short version of his already in production AK-74 SE. Just before that, in the 60s, the Soviet government was very interested in acquiring a bullpup rifle, and above all, that these incorporated polymers in their design. In these years, the famous Soviet weapon creators were presenting bullpup prototypes with polymers, and the Soviet armed forces were evaluating them with quite optimism. Alexander Konstantinov would see an opportunity in this new trend and would try to create the ultimate bullpup rifle to not fall behind his rivals. He had already collaborated in the creation of many experimental bullpup weapons, so it was nothing new for him. He wanted his rifle to have an extremely avant-garde design, just like the bullpup methodology itself. In this way, in 1963, he would design the Konstantinov SA-01. This armament wonder aimed to be the most comfortable and ergonomic weapon in the world. What stood out most about it was that it had a pistol grip on the mechanism box, so the mechanism box, the barrel, and the stock along with the magazine were all below the hands. In a bullpup configuration, as a result, it could be fired by both right-handed and left-handed people with total comfort. The bullpup configuration made it extremely short. The barrel literally only protruded 5 centimeters more than your hand when gripping it, so it was perfect for close quarters battle in urban environments. In addition, the problem of losing the sight when reloading with bullpup weapons has been solved. It was extremely good, it had good aim, it didn't feel unbalanced, and you could learn to use it very easily if you put effort into it. Alexander Konstantinov created the first prototype, and in his words, he said he created a new type of weapon, the inverted bullpup weapons. He presented the new design to the army, which according to him was going to be a turning point in weapons design. However, the army found it to be too radical and it was quickly rejected. Everyone who tested the weapon felt it was very difficult to use, as it was too different from the usual. It had a major problem. It could not be comfortably fired from the chest or ground. In fact, it was impossible because the weapon protruded too much, and you also couldn't fire it from a cover that shielded you from below. Alexander would not give up and would propose to create a new bullpup weapon. He would create the Konstantinov SA-001, a less avant-garde bullpup weapon, and looking to satisfy more the demand of the Soviet army. But even though tests were conducted and there was much better reception from the armed forces, it never managed to stand out beyond the Kalashnikov weapons. Alexander Semenovich Konstantinov never achieved much with his career as a weapons designer, but without a doubt his ideas and creations were curious and interesting enough to endure in history, and of course to be remembered by enthusiasts like you and me. If you like this video, you might be interested in this one, where we talk about the strange chromed weapons of the North Koreans. Thank you so much for watching this video, and of course, see you in the next one. Goodbye.